Hello, I'm Lauren Boone. I'm the ESL Program Coordinator at Harding and the person in charge of the TESL classes at Harding. TESL is Teaching English as a Second Language, and I want to talk to you a little bit about becoming an ESL teacher and what that means and how you can do that. First of all, I want to give you a little bit of information. Some people don't realize that 75% of ESL students, and ESL means English as a Second Language, or you might have heard them called ELLs, that's English Language Learners, or ELs, English Learners. 75% of ESL students in American schools are born in the United States. They're American citizens. There's a misconception that there's a lot of illegal students and stuff like that, but more than 75% of ELLs in the United States were born in the United States and they are citizens, but at home their family speaks another language. Another misconception is that they're all Spanish speakers. That's not at all true. A large percentage are Spanish speakers. That is the language that the majority of those students speak, but the top 5 languages in the United States are Spanish, Arabic, Chinese, Vietnamese, and Haitian Creole. And in some places, there's many other languages, and in fact, many other languages are the dominant language of the ESL students and not Spanish. I want to talk to you a little bit about becoming an ESL teacher because that is a shortage in many states. ESL students are almost 10% of the K-12 population in American schools now. Now this year with the census, it'll be interesting to find out what the percentage actually is. But even just a few years ago, it was more than 9% of the K-12 student population. So almost everywhere you go, there are ESL students. You don't have to be in a big city, and you don't have to be only in Texas or Arizona or Florida. That's a big misconception. Even here in Searcy, of course, there's ESL students. And in some schools in rural areas, there's lots of ESL students because of the work their families do. That is traveling around like migrant workers, working at farms or chicken plants or other kind of factory or manufacturing or plant type work. I want to talk to you a little bit about what ESL teachers do and the different methods of ESL teaching. And I want to talk to you a little bit about how you can become certified to be an ESL teacher in addition to whatever certification you're already seeking. First of all, there's different models, and it depends very much on the number of students. If you're in an area with a lot of ESL students, you're going to do something very different than if you're in an area with just a few. If you're in an area with just a few ESL students, there might be one ESL teacher for the whole district, and the teacher travels from school to school during the day or during the week and pulls the students out for ESL classes. Now you might be asking, what happens in an ESL class? Well, in many cases it's English language development, or what we call ELD, actually teaching English skills, reading, writing, listening, speaking, vocabulary. But it's also a lot of content support, supporting the content teacher by reinforcing the content and working on academic vocabulary and academic skills. Also in these models, a lot of times the ESL teacher pushes in, and that means they go to the class and they work with the ESL students in class. As the teacher is doing a lesson on the content area, the ESL teacher is there beside the students, helping them or pulling them out into small groups to work on the content, things like that. So that's pull out or push in. It's either pulling the students out, usually in groups according to their ability level, their proficiency level in English, I mean, or their grade level, or it's pushing into the classroom. That's something like what we have here in Searcy, in Kensett, that's the model. In a lot of places, that's the model, where there's not that many students, and the teacher might travel from school to school, maybe visit 2 or 3 schools in a day, and pull out the students according to their proficiency level, which is measured by a test I'll talk more about later. In other places where there's a lot of ESL students, it's done differently. It could be done with co-teaching. That's becoming more and more popular, where the ESL teacher and a regular content area teacher both have the same classroom and they co-teach. And that's done in more models. You know, I cannot go into all the details of that right now, but they co-teach all day, every day. They're both in the classroom. They both have that group of students all day, every day. Even when there's non-native speaking students or ESL students mixed in with native speaking students, it doesn't matter. The ESL teacher and the regular content teacher share the responsibility for the whole class, and they both teach the whole class. Yes, they pull them out into different groups according to what they're doing, but they're both the teacher in charge of that class. Like I said, there's more to that, but I don't have time to go into that now. Another model is sheltered instruction. And this works very well whether you have 1, 2, 3 ESL students in the room or a whole classroom of ESL students. Sheltered instruction is where you use certain techniques to be sure that the ESL students can understand the content. And that's a lot of what we talk about in the methods class, TESL 4330, which will be offered in the fall. It's offered every fall. But in the methods class, we talk a lot about sheltered instruction because even if you're a regular content teacher, knowing those sheltered techniques is very useful for when you have ESL students in the class. And I should let you know at this point that ESL students are placed in regular classes and they must understand and be tested on the same course of study as the regular native speaking students. That means that the content area teacher is responsible for what they learn and even their language development. That's why TESL classes are so important for all teachers. And more states are requiring that all licensed teachers have a certain number of hours of coursework in TESL, teaching English as a second language. So sheltered instruction means I might have just a few non-native speakers or ESL students in with the native speaking students, the American students. I hesitate to use that word American students because the ESL students are Americans too, in many cases, but native speaking English students, non-ESL students. Whether you have 2 or 3 mixed in or whether you have a whole class, sheltered instruction works very well. And so, for example, in a large school district like Birmingham City Schools in Alabama, there is a sheltered math class where all the students are ESL and the teacher is teaching math with ESL techniques. There's a sheltered social studies, there's a sheltered science, there's a sheltered language arts. And so some states use that model where the whole room is non-native speaking students, they're all ESL students, but in many states there's not that many students to do that, or in many districts I should say, so they're just mixed in with everybody else, but the teacher's using sheltered content, which is beneficial to the entire class. So sheltered content is another method. So there's pull out, there's push in, there's co-teaching, there's sheltered instruction. In some states where there's a lot of ESL students, or in some districts I should say, because it does vary from district to district. For example, what Little Rock does might be different than what Searcy does. It does depend on the number of students and the resources available. But in some states where there's a lot of ESL students, there are newcomer academies for new students. Those would be ones who have very low language ability, or they are new to the United States, they're immigrants, or they're visiting with parents who will be here for only a few years. And at a newcomer academy, everybody's an ESL student, and they're learning how to adapt to the American school system as well as intensive English work and schoolwork to get them up to speed to where they need to be. For example, there's a newcomer academy up in Northwest Arkansas. Because they have a lot of ESL students in Northwest Arkansas, not Spanish speakers, but they speak Marshallese. They're from the Marshall Islands. And of course, that's not unique to Northwest Arkansas. These newcomer academies occur in lots of places where there's a lot of ESL students who are new. There's constantly new ESL students coming in. They have a newcomer academy with just ESL students who are new. And usually the students are there for a year, until the next year they should be caught up, ready to join the regular class. At this point, I should let you know that ESL students are tested for English proficiency every year. Of course, they're tested when they first arrive. And there's different tests they can take. We won't talk about that here. But the level that they score at on those English proficiency tests are what the teacher is teaching to, and the level indicates that they are qualified for ESL services or not. Usually if you score at a level 5 on those tests, or even a level 4, kind of depends on the district and where they've set the line, you do not get any ESL services. You are considered just like a native speaking student, and you carry on as usual. You do not get any accommodations. But if you score 1 to 3 or 1 to 4, that puts you at a certain level of English proficiency. A level 1 would be a very beginner. A level 4 would be pretty good, getting up there close to a native speaker. Maybe they don't need very many services at all, very many accommodations at all. The results of that test are what identify a student as an ESL student and determine the accommodations and services they get. So at a newcomer academy, the students would be new, they would have been tested, they would have shown to be a certain level of English proficiency, below 5 or below 4, and they would go in that newcomer academy. But, for example, Searcy Schools doesn't have anything like a newcomer academy because there's simply not enough ESL students. They will be tested, and they will get services and accommodations according to their language proficiency level, but they will be put in a regular classroom and be expected to master the same basic course of study. And I should tell you, they have to go in a grade level appropriate for their age. Even if I tested as a level 1 student with almost no English, if I'm 14 years old, I have to go to 8th grade. So you can see that that's why knowing some sheltered techniques is very useful for any teacher. I might have a student whose English proficiency level is very low. In my 9th grade biology class, they still need to master the same course of study. And they will be tested for English proficiency. I have to also be working on that with them. That's something we talk more about in the methods class. Okay, so English proficiency is tested yearly. Here in Arkansas, it's tested with a test called the ELPA 21. That test is also used in Texas and Louisiana. In a lot of states, they're tested using what we call the WIDA access test. WIDA is a consortium of many states in the United States that share tests and resources for English language learners. Arkansas is not part of that consortium. That's okay. Arkansas still has its own tests and its own resources, but WIDA, W-I-D-A, is one big consortium in the United States. Many states belong to that and use WIDA resources and WIDA tests, like the WIDA access test. That's the name of the English proficiency test.